Greetings, everyone. Steve, the amateur historian, coming to you from a bomb shelter of a bus stop. I feel so insulated and safe here. When the big quake comes, I want to be here. And I'm hanging out here, waiting for the bus to finally show itself, so that I can do what all great people did back in the old days of America, and that is go west. Literally, I'm waiting to catch a bus to travel west to a certain location only a few blocks that way, so that I can bring to you a fresh episode of Historic Murders of Portland. Alright, everybody, so what have I got for you? Well, I got for you another intriguing story of murder. Murder in relation to yet another man in the annals of Portland whose wife left him and he couldn't handle it. That brings me to southeast Portland today. I'm just a little north of Sellwood. Sellwood, the kind of northern border of Sellwood's just a couple blocks this way. We're just north of Sellwood. Willamette River's kind of right over here. Downtown Portland's off this direction. Kind of gives you a general idea as to where I am. And I'm trying to get up to Milwaukee Avenue up here. There was a actually fairly prominent local musician. He performed professionally, did a lot of apparently very high-class gigs. And yeah, he was essentially a concert violinist. I don't know, it doesn't sound like, I know it's a term, but it doesn't sound like one. Yeah, he was a gentleman named Lou Winters, and he lived right up the street here at the intersection. Even though the streets stagger, he lived up here at Milwaukee Avenue and Boyce Street. Now, Portland is known for having streets that have names with certain spellings, but the spellings aren't what you'd think. What you would think is Couch Street is actually Cooch Street. And what you would think is Boise Street, because this is the street, and it's spelled like Boise, B-O-I-S-E. It's actually Boyce Street. And there's a Boyce neighborhood up in North Portland. Just a little extra history for you. But anyway, Mr. Winters, violinist, lived with his wife right up here. Man, this house is beat up. I guess they're doing work on it. Anyway, here I am. This is where Boyce Street here meets Milwaukee Avenue. And interestingly enough, Milwaukee Avenue, it's named after the town of Milwaukee, which is that way. But Milwaukee Avenue doesn't actually go through Milwaukee. It actually ends in Sellwood a couple of blocks before you cross the border into Milwaukee. But for our sake, Lou Winters, his home would have been right here. Where there's some business here. There's a forklift there. There's a warning forklift traffic sign. Some kind of forklift something or other going on here. Like I said, Boise kind of staggers here. So you've got Boise Street traveling eastbound right there, and then traveling westbound Boyce Street. I just called it Boise Street, see? Boyce Street. Traveling westbound is up here, so it staggers a bit. And specifically, Lou Winters lived at Boyce in Milwaukee, but it was right here, not over there, as I initially thought. Now it's October 12th. 1913. Lou Winters has just finished one of his many violin concert gigs, and he did it in Sellwood. So again, he would have been south, this direction. Sellwood is just that way. And he hopped the streetcar to come home, because there used to be a streetcar line that rolled down Milwaukee Avenue. There's old pictures of Portland that show the streetcar the tracks kind of going through the middle of town. So probably somewhere under all this concrete, there's possibly still steel from those lines. And they say he hopped off. I think there was a streetcar stop like right here, because they said it was just north of his home. So if his home is here, probably would have been right, somewhere right here, there would have been a stop for him to hop off at. It's a couple minutes before midnight. He hops off, and he's obviously heading home. But he doesn't make it because, and this is how the authorities have broken it down. This is what authorities believe happened, was he got to, this part where Boyce and Milwaukee Avenue meet, the one traveling westbound with his home right here. Somebody lurched out of the darkness of, the area of his home, which was a home, and it was actually a real estate office that he ran. So this Lou Winters guy was a pretty interesting fellow. He was a concert violinist who just happened to dabble in real estate. And he had an office connected to his home. So from the vicinity of that area, somebody lurched out and attacked him in this area. Now, initial reports just implied that somebody came out and attacked him. They were successful, they ran off, and Winters was left here to die. But it seems like the initial attack happened here, but Winters fought back. I mean, Winters had his violin on him, so maybe he was swinging his violin case at this person or what, but it seemed like the perpetrator who swung an item at him started running in this direction. And Lou Winters was pissed, apparently, and gave chase. And they ran more towards the eastbound Boyce intersection with Milwaukee. And it was at this point that the two men came together, and the perpetrator, who had an item of some kind, struck down Lou Williams violently in the head. Lou Williams collapsed unconscious right around this intersection right here, and the perpetrator fled. A little while later on down the road, Lou Winters was discovered here, still collapsed in the street, his violin case at his side, and he died as a result of his injuries. He was struck so violently in the head that he didn't have just one massive crack, but there was like fracturing all around his head. In the aftermath, the analysis, when they did the autopsy and discovered, how he died, even though it was pretty obvious, it was determined that somebody with a very strong arm wielded a very solid weapon of some kind, a gas pipe, something like that, down on his head. And shortly, almost immediately after Lou Winters was discovered here and died as a result of his injuries, the authorities determined almost immediately who they thought the suspect was. And it was a guy named Lloyd Wilkins. Backstory to this guy, like so many others, Lloyd Wilkins was in a relationship with a woman, or in marriage relationship with a woman. And, for whatever reasons, the newspaper said there was an indiscretion engaged in by Lloyd Wilkins against his wife, which translation means he cheated on her, probably. And this is shortly before Lou Winters is attacked. I love there's just a beer keg sitting here. Side note. And they were up towards, I want to say, Astoria. So, about 90 miles this way, up in the Oregon Peninsula, kind of the furthest northwest corners where Astoria is. And Lloyd Wilkins' wife was friends, or at least acquaintances, with Lou Winters' daughter, a woman named Frankie Winters. And she actually went up to Astoria when Wilkins and his wife had this falling out, picked her up and brought her back to Portland, and she actually stayed. Wilkins' wife stayed at the home here with Lou and his wife for just a couple days. I heard that she came down with an illness, stayed here a couple days, and she ultimately went south to Salem. And didn't want her husband, Lloyd, to know where she was. That was made abundantly clear because Lloyd Wilkins started coming around and asking repeatedly. He threatened Frankie Winters' life because, he knew that she was instrumental in getting his wife out of there, and she wouldn't tell him where his wife went. Lou wouldn't tell him where his wife went. And so Lloyd's getting very angry, very desperate, very maniacal. And, he threatened Frankie Wilkins, Frankie Winters. I knew I was going to screw these names up. I mean, come on. You have a victim named Lou Winters and a possible perpetrator named Lloyd Wilkins. How am I not going to mix those names up? But anyway, Lloyd Wilkins had threatened Lou's daughter and Lou himself. And he was angry because he felt that these various members of the Winters family were trying to keep his wife away from him, which she had every right to be away from him. So you're getting kind of a maniacal streak in this guy, one of these guys who's super desperate to get his wife back. And then suddenly out of nowhere, right after this stuff starts happening, someone breaks in. This is literally what happened. Someone broke in to Lou Winters' real estate office. The whole place was ransacked. They theorized that Lloyd Wilkins probably broke into there and was going through all of Lou Winters' papers and whatnot, see if he could find any letters or anything that would say where his wife had gone off to. And so the idea is he laid in wait here for Lou Winters to come home, and had a weapon of some kind, and he lurched out of the darkness and attacked him and ultimately struck him with his death blow right here. I'm now standing along Boyce Street, just a few blocks down from where the attack on Lou Winters occurred. Literally, you can see cars passing up there. That's Milwaukee Avenue way up there. So we're only a few blocks down. And authorities believe after the assault that Wilkins beelined it down Boyce Street here. And the reason they felt this was, obviously in the aftermath of the assault, Wilkins is nowhere to be found. So the presumption is immediately that he has fled town. And what's behind me here, this is TriMet property, Portland's, public transportation apparatus, just a bunch of buses and stuff. But back in the day, this fence wouldn't have been here, all this stuff would have been here, but on the other side of all this TriMet hullabaloo would be a massive railroad yard. I think it's called it's the Brooklyn Rail Yards. I've talked about it in another documentary I did, but it's a main gathering place. Several lines, so many trains going through, and the thought is that after the attack, Wilkins ran straight down Boyce Street, possibly ditching his weapon along the way, ran into the railway yards back here and hopped a train that was leaving town. They figured he was probably, if he was going to catch a train, he was going to catch a train going north. That was what they thought was the case. The problem is, though, in all of this, we obviously have a lot of circumstantial evidence. Lloyd Wilkins had all the motive in the world to get confrontational with Lou Winters, who, by all accounts, didn't really have any adversaries. But the big issue was nobody witnessed this attack. Nobody actually saw who attacked Lou Winters. The closest thing they had was one of his neighbors said that he heard Lou Williams scream, probably when he was being hit. But they didn't go out to address it. That, unfortunately, was a very common thing. A lot of people didn't get involved. It's very interesting. A lot of people wouldn't get involved with, they'd hear some screaming or they'd hear some gunshots in the distance, but they wouldn't get involved in stuff. they would just kind of blow it off. This is a really cool old building. It looks vacant. They better not demolish that. I'll lose my mind. But that was authorities' biggest issue. Like, we have a guy who's probably done it, but how do we even prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Lloyd Wilkins was even in this area when this crime happened? Well, fortunately for authorities, because they needed something, there was a saloon that they say was approximately 3 or so blocks north of where Lou Winter's home was. So we're literally right up the street. Now, based on that description, which is all I have to go on, that would put us approximately at Milwaukee, and I think it's Roane Street. It's spelled R-H-O-N-E. Maybe it's Ronnie or Roane. I've never actually heard anybody say how this is spelled, and I'm sure somebody in the comments who's lived in Portland a long time will clarify. But this intersection up here, and again, it's another staggered one, but coming through here and coming through up there, this is where Roane Street comes through, and there was apparently a saloon in this vicinity, maybe where this business center is today, because a lot of these houses look really old, like they were probably here when Winters was attacked. Anyway, so the saloon owner here, just a couple blocks from Lou Winters' house, he said that a man identical to Lloyd Wilkins, he essentially said it was Lloyd Wilkins, came into his establishment at this intersection around 11 p.m., less than an hour before Lou Winters was attacked and killed. And, this guy came in, had a drink, was here for a little bit, and then took off. So, logistically, we have Lloyd Wilkins identified by a witness, 30 to 40 minutes probably before Lou Winters is killed, and we're 3 blocks away. 3 blocks that way is Lou Winters' house is 3 blocks that way. So that was a major benefit to authorities, is that they finally had a witness to put Lloyd Wilkins in this neighborhood during the hour that Lou Winters was killed. So Lloyd Wilkins was in quite a bit of trouble. But fortunately, Lloyd Wilkins was tracked down and apprehended pretty quickly. He'd only made it to Vancouver, Washington, just across the border. And so, of course, he's apprehended, he's brought in, and he admits to attacking Lou Winters. He also claims that he has an accomplice with him, something that the police didn't believe. It seems like he stuck to that story for a while, and then it kind of went by the wayside. But something that's real, obviously, I think he knew that they kind of had him dead to rights on this, and I think he wanted to do the best he could to try to get out of a death penalty on a first-degree murder charge. So he admitted to it, but like so many other things, he had his own little twist on it. And one of the things was, he obviously claimed that he didn't intend to murder Lou Williams, which, guilty or innocent, they all say that. He said that the item that he had that he struck Lou Winters on the head with was just an umbrella. It's just an umbrella. I was just a man about town twirling my umbrella, and then I accidentally brought it down on somebody's head. But again, the damage to Lou Winters' skull was just extreme fracturing all around. The autopsy that was performed, the individual that did it said whoever did this used a very dense, again, like a gas pipe or something like that. This was a very strong weapon. This was not some flimsy-ass umbrella. Bring an umbrella down on my head pretty hard, you're going to have to hit me a couple times before my skull fractures. It might not even fracture depending on the umbrella you're using. But I think, he was trying to use something that logically you could strike someone with in the same way that you might strike them with a gas pipe. I don't know. But I think he was trying to show that he didn't show up with a serious weapon, which then implies that there was no premeditation to attack. If he shows up with a baton or something, or something that could easily be wielded as a weapon, logistically, it's a lot easier to say, oh, he came pre-prepared to kill. He brought this weapon with him. But if he's just a man walking around with an umbrella, it's like, that doesn't sound like a guy lying in wait to kill someone. But I think he was just trying to skirt the reality, which is that he probably had a much more serious weapon on hand. And one of the reasons I believe this, aside from the fact that it was obvious that whatever did this damage to Lou Winters' head was not an umbrella, authorities are dead certain, again, that Lloyd Wilkins did the attack here and sprinted this way down Boyce Street, as I just showed you, towards the train lines, took a train, and ultimately ended up in Vancouver. There was even a mask that had actually belonged to Lou Winters that had been taken from his office, and they think that Lloyd Wilkins took the mask. Maybe he was trying to cover his face up to hide himself, even though he then admitted that the whole reason he went there was to try to have a conversation with Lou Winters and try to get him to tell him where his wife was. So I don't see why he'd be wearing a mask to conceal his identity. If he's going to show up and ask where his wife is, Lou Winters is going to immediately know who he's talking to. But whatever the case, the mask was located over here, kind of just this side of where Winters fell dead, showing that for whatever reason Lloyd Wilkins had that mask on him. He dropped it heading in this direction. But he told authorities that he actually started going south on Milwaukee Avenue. So he told them he started going off in this direction, and that he turned down a side street, which Holgate is a busy street 2 blocks up. So I can only assume what he meant was that he turned on this next street right up here, and that he started going this way towards the river. So this is Cora Street up here. So I think the implication is that he said that he ran towards this intersection and then turned up Cora Street. And just a few blocks up is McLaughlin Boulevard up here. And then past that, you drop down is the Willamette River. So he said he ran this direction, ultimately ended up running down to the river and ended up, down by the riverside there. And seems he fled northbound from there. That's what he said. Now, I think that's a bunch of nonsense. And I think the reason he said he went the complete opposite direction that it seems pretty clear he went is because somewhere along the way he probably ditched the real weapon. And if he can lead the police the wrong direction, they're going to search this whole route that he took, and they're not going to find the weapon because he never went that way to begin with. I think he was trying to steer them clear of stumbling onto the weapon that he had likely disposed of somewhere going in that direction. And that's why he tried to lead him on this wild goose chase. So, Lloyd Wilkins gets apprehended, generally kind of admits to being involved, or to being the guy. And, this is crazy. There's a show that I worked on, and literally it was inside this building that we did the episodes. I didn't realize I was going to be turning down Lafayette Street, but I am. Anywho, sorry, I see stuff I know and it gets my attention. Yeah, literally, we filmed episodes on the other side of this garage door. It's like a studio space. Anyway, so Lloyd Winters does essentially what anyone would do, and thank God the Winters never gave in, because obviously this guy had a mean, abusive streak in him. We saw that with the attack on Lou Winters. Who knows what would have happened if he would have caught up with his wife. And it's good that he didn't know that she was in Salem all this time. So his defense team does what they all do. They try to claim Lloyd Wilkins has been driven mad, and that he's they tried to do the whole insanity defense. And this was another very common thing. It's very stupid, but it was unfortunately sometimes effective. Back in the day, this was a very common thing that, because, people didn't understand psychology that well back then. This is 1913. And it was a very common thing, and they tried doing it for Lloyd Wilkins. It was this whole, I sustained a head injury sometime earlier in my life, and because of that, I'm now insane. and they would get a few friends and family who would all have a motive and a bias to try to get this guy the lightest sentence possible, or to get him off on an insanity defense. And they get these people to all go on stage and be like, oh yeah, he was totally normal, then after that accident he changed. It was very, like, obviously suffering head trauma can change who you are, but, you know, the motive always being put forth was someone sustained this injury and it made them homicidal, apparently. That was the argument being pushed forward. It was so stupid, but it was sometimes effective. And yeah, that's apparently Lou Winters, years before, he was working he was in Wisconsin, and he was working on a locomotive, and something struck him and it knocked him off the locomotive, and he fell like 20 feet to the ground, hit his head, had some head trauma. They brought some people in who claimed he was changed. He was never quite the same after that. And I'm glad to say, not that I support the death penalty, but, you know, I always hated it when somebody would use that and it would be effective. I mean, I understand why it was. It was another time. It was over 100 years ago, but that effort in trying to claim that Lloyd Wilkins was insane was not effective. And he was, I mean, it was so abundantly clear. And once he admitted to it, I mean, you didn't have to worry about proving he did it. It was a matter of why he did it. Which they had, you know, they had the clear motive. He was pissed at the whole Winters family for keeping him from his wife. And I think he showed up, maybe not intending to kill, but he was prepared to kill because he had a weapon on him. Which shows at least premeditation to the idea that he was okay with assaulting this man. And, you know, it was abundantly clear that, you know, some confrontation was pre-planned. He had all the motive in the world. It was abundantly clear this was not an accident. With how hard he struck this man, it was obvious he wasn't intending to just stun him a little bit. So he was ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder, which at the time carried a mandatory death sentence. Again, I am not a proponent of the death penalty. I don't think I mean, I feel like it's already been shown that threatening someone with a, you know, if you do this, we'll execute you, has not stopped, you know, criminals in the past who have wanted to kill and successfully killed others. And I honestly think it lets some people off the hook. You know, I think you should have to, if you do something horrible enough, I think you should have to endure prison. Our prison system needs to change. I'm getting off on a lot of tangents now. But anyway, that is how the Lloyd Wilkins story ended, is he was found guilty of first-degree murder. There was no real doubt as to what happened when all was said and done. So thank you so much for watching. As always, remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit up my Patreon if you so choose. And all that said, there's a train a-coming. A train I need to catch. Okay. So till next time, everybody. This has been Steve the Amateur Historian, and I will catch you some other time.